That's what it looks like here behind me. Recording my my weekly show. Had a bit of a hiatus last week. And I do need some coffee to get the energy necessary to record 2 hours of podcasting. Hope you all are doing well. It's a nice day here in the Netherlands. I have a bit of a cold, which is always problematic when the coronavirus is still roaming, because then I have to stay inside. Hello, HK Nate Mom, Tanya, Michael or Michelle. How should I pronounce that? So as soon as I've finished my coffee, I'll start recording. That is, I'm already recording on YouTube, but I'll be recording the show. Got a couple of interesting topics to talk about. I watched Snowpiercer on Netflix, or at least the first 2 episodes. It's pretty good. Chris says, "Are you happy the Efteling is back open?" Yes, that is very good for the people that live in the area of the Efteling, although you have to reserve your tickets, I think, and they're booked for weeks to come. Chris is from California. How do you know about the Efteling then? That's a theme park in the Netherlands. It's kind of a bit like Disneyland, nicer in a certain way. Has its own style, but it's based on fairy tales. Very cool. Love going there. Journo Films is there too. Hi, and Adam. So we'll talk a bit about TV shows. I want to talk about sprinkling holy water with squirt guns. That is a thing, apparently. And I started reading the Hunger Games prequel. And of course, we need to talk about Star Trek and Star Wars, because there was quite a bit of that in the news. And then I'll give you my first impressions of the Osmo Mobile 3. The film was very good. Yeah, the series, you'll have to wait for my review. Are you looking forward to The Mandalorian Season 2? Oh, yes. Aren't we all? Where would I be without coffee these days? All right, let's get this over with so I can go back to playing Animal Crossing. Let me get that stuff out of the way. Off screen. Chris visited the Efteling twice. Oh, very cool. The Fairy Tale Forest is my favorite. That's actually the oldest bit of the park. Already visited as a child. Nate Dogg says, "I really enjoyed your mass service a couple of days ago." That's good to hear. I'll be back next Sunday. All right, let's get this show off the ground. I was going to play the trailer for Snowpiercer. That is, if I still have that window open on my browser. But maybe not, because I've been doing quite a bit of other stuff lately. That's not it. Maybe this one? No, that's Animal Talking. I'm watching a lot of Animal Crossing tutorials. I'm officially hooked. I've got way too many tabs open. No, I don't think I have it. Okay. So what was it called? Snowpiercer trailer. YouTube. Snowpiercer trailer. 2020. That's probably it. Yeah, there you go. Official trailer, Netflix. That's the one. Yes. Now, there's one last thing I need to do. It's a good thing I check, because I need to route the audio of the computer through my headphones. Yeah, it works. Good. Hey, Sam. A priest is never late. He arrives exactly when he means to. Yeah, never early, never late. Adam went to the Keukenhof in 1973. Chris cannot pronounce the Dutch name for the Efteling. It's not too hard. Efteling. Efteling, you can say F, you can say T, and Ling, bowling, Efteling. It's the same thing. And the Keukenhof, the Ö, that's a sound that doesn't exist in English, the Ö. It's not U or E or O, it's Ö, Ö. Like giant, the word for giant in Dutch is reus, Ö. Oh, fairy tale forest. Fairy tale forest in Dutch is sprookjesbos. Sprookjesbos. Bos is forest. Sprookje is fairy tale. So sprook. Spoke, you can say spoke. You just add an R. Sprook. Jus. What does that resemble? Jus. Just. It's it's not like just, but it has a J, the Y. You. It's the Y of you. Y. Z. Bos. Bos is very O. Closed O. Sounds like the Swedish letter Ö. Yeah, like in my name, Von Heugen. It's the same sound, actually. My last name in Dutch is Von Heugen. And it always gets butchered up when I go to the US. Van Hogen. Roderick Van Hogen. No, Von Heugen. Oh, well, it's a lot in life to have our names mispronounced. All right, I think I got my ducks in a row. So here we go. Let's press record on this one too. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Wookiees and Stormtroopers. Welcome to my weekly show. I'm Father Roderick, and I've got a good show for you in store. We got to talk about Muppets, about Star Trek, about Star Wars, Hunger Games, holy water and squirt guns, and so much more. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. As always, this episode is brought to you thanks to my patrons, and we finally have been able to configure Patreon, which is the website that I use for this community of supporters, in such a way that I get notified when we have new patrons. Well, it turns out that functionality was off since the beginning of this year, I think. So all of a sudden, it gave me a list of relatively recent patrons, and as always, I want to mention them by name. This is going to be a long list, and I may have mentioned some of those patrons before, but I just want to give you an idea who is behind the show, because it's not just me behind the microphone. I wouldn't be able to do this work if it weren't for those monthly supporters. So here's a huge thank you to Green Mountains H79, Roberto, Jim, Craig, Matthew, Miguel, Martinez, Jessica, Mark, Martha and Darwin, Herman, Oliver, Laura, Nick, Jeremy, The Gaming Politician, Bob, Nadine, Sean, Teresa, Lee, Jennifer, Harry, Suzanne, Lisa, and Margarita. All of you, huge thank you. This is not the entire list. The community is much bigger than that, and there are a number of people that just very recently signed up as patrons. I think it was during the weekend, probably because they saw me celebrating the Mass for Geeks. So I want to welcome them too. I will mention your name next week when Patreon gives me this new list. If you want to join them and get access to a second podcast, which I will mention at the end of the show as well, I will give you the contents of that show. It's very much like this show, so if you enjoy this, it's gonna sound like this, it's gonna feel like this, but it's got a totally different lineup of topics. So you get access to that if you become a patron. Go over to patreon.com for more, / Father Roderick. You need to add that for more information.
You know what's going on? This is what's happening in your world.
Face it, Catholics rule. We got Boston, South America, the good part of Ireland, and we're making serious inroads in Mozambique, baby.
You've taken your first step into a larger world.
Well, we're currently in a race against time here in my parishes, and that is because the Dutch bishops have finally issued a very strict protocol for the reopening of our churches. For 10 weeks now, I've been celebrating Mass behind closed doors, and since I was also the person in charge of streaming the Masses for the 2 parishes that I work for, I had a little bit of help during Mass of a few people, but let's say the maximum people in church was 6, all involved in making sure that it looks well on our screens. However, that's going to change. Our society here in the Netherlands seems to have COVID-19 under control, more or less. It doesn't mean that the virus is gone, far from that, and we still have to be very, very careful, but there is ample proof that we can open up the society without all of a sudden causing new cases, or new cases. There will be new cases of people getting infected for months to come, hopefully not years. But the risks are so low that we can now start to gather again, if, of course, we respect the general rules of hygiene and social distancing. So churches will also reopen starting on June the 1st, so that's going to be the day after Pentecost. Unfortunately, Pentecost itself is still going to be celebrated behind closed doors and streamed via webcam. But we can only start with 30 people per church, maximum. 30 people, that's not much. And then hopefully, if everything goes well, and of course that depends on the entire society, starting the July 1st, we'll be able to welcome about 100 people. That is, if you can place them at a distance of 1.5 meters per person. So for some churches, we won't be able to fill it to capacity. And we'll just have to wait and see what that means. And of course, we have to wait and see if things continue to go well. If there is a sudden rise in corona cases, then of course everything may change again. But the thing is, the bishops have issued very, very strict rules and prescriptions on how to celebrate Mass and where people should sit, how communion is arranged. It is much more complicated than what we do right now. The streaming, the Masses that we stream are already pretty complicated, and we have taken into account all the precautions for, you don't want to infect the few people that help me to stream these Masses, but it's a different ballgame when you have 30 people and Mass is public. There's a whole organization. You have to reserve your seat. You have to do intake conversations. Communion itself, very complicated. So anyway, it's a race against time because June the 1st is just around the corner. It's actually this upcoming Monday, and I am not sure if we will be ready to open the church, but we're going to do whatever we can. And, we'll just have to wait and see. And make the most out of it. I will continue to stream my English Masses for the foreseeable future, because of course that has a worldwide audience, and it seems to be helping quite a few people. So, I'm celebrating those Masses on Sunday evening so they don't clash with my other duties in the parish. So thankfully I'll be able to stream that. I'll be giving an update on the cameras that I use for streaming Mass in the tech segment of the episode. But first, it is time to visit the segment, or visit the movies. Or in my case, visit my TV, where I watch movies via Netflix, because I haven't been in a movie theater since the beginning of this year, I think. Right before Corona started, I stopped my subscription to my local theater. And in hindsight, that was actually a very smart decision because nobody was able to go to theaters for months, actually. So I saved myself some money there.
How do you not like movies?
They're predictable. Like, the guy gets the girl, and that kid sees dead people, and Darth Vader is Luke's father.
Not liking movies is like not liking puppies.
They're fine. I just get bored and never make it to the end.
You know, you need a movie education. You need a movication. Now I'm gonna give it to you.
There was some news on Disney Plus about an upcoming series that I did not expect would ever happen again. I'm talking about Muppets Now. It is a new television series that is going to premiere on July the 31st, and it will show us the Muppets, according to the description, the very short description of that show, unscripted. So I don't know if that means that it is an improvised show, whether this is going to be like a faux behind-the-scenes type of show, but I don't care. It's the Muppets. They're back. They're going to be back on TV, and I couldn't be more excited. I grew up with the Muppets. I loved watching the Muppet Show. I think I've seen every single episode multiple times. I even recorded the sound of of some of the shows. This was way before everyone had video recorders. I recorded the audio on my cassette player, and then I would play that audio back and kind of play back the episode in my mind. I remember having a tape, and I wonder if it's still there somewhere, if it's still around somewhere. Maybe my mom has kept it in the attic. I recorded the audio for the episode, the famous episode with Luke Skywalker, that was an entirely Star Wars themed episode of the Muppets, and it was glorious. And it featured both Mark Hamill and Luke Skywalker. I think they used like a split screen or something like that to have both the actor and the character that the actor plays in the show. It featured, I think, Muppets in Space with Luke Skywalker. It was so fantastic and so funny. And I will always remember that particular episode fondly, but there were so many classic moments in there. And you kind of miss those characters. Of course, there is Muppets on YouTube and Muppets on social media, but it's all very short fragments, and it's almost a shadow of what that show once was. I never understood why they didn't resurrect it. And even this, it's not the real Muppet Show. This is something new. Maybe it is because they've tested it with audiences and the old format didn't work anymore. But you know what? I would really, really pay for the classic format of the Muppet Show to come back. It was so fantastic, and they did such a great job with those. You know, with the concept, it was just like watching a theater show. And there would be songs, and you would have all these famous people. I don't know. It was like a late night show with puppets and with a ton of humor and a ton of heart. But anyway, this is second best Disney Plus Muppets Now, July the 31st. I can't wait to see more. No trailers yet. Then I have to kind of retract a review that I gave a number of weeks ago of a series that I tried out on Netflix, and I just didn't get it, so I stopped watching it, and I was pretty negative about it, I think, in this show. I recently talked to my friend Sebastian, and he was the one who recommended that show to me, and he was a little bit behind on the podcast, and so he's like, well, the other day I was listening to one of your old shows, and then you mentioned my name, and you say, well, hey, Sebastian recommended a television series, so I'm like, oh my gosh, I mentioned on the podcast, and then you go on and you completely destroy the TV show that I recommended to you. Thanks, but no thanks. It turns out I had to revisit that show, and I totally have to change my verdict on that show. I'm talking about the television show Ozark. Ozark tells the story of a family whose father, or the father of the family, makes his money by laundering other people's money. Of course, that is bound to go wrong, and so at one point, turns out that his partner in crime was taking a cut from the money that he laundered. The mafia, whatever criminal organization that was giving the orders to launder the money, discovered that, and then he's the only one. The father is the only one who survives the retribution, and he gets tasked to move with his family to Ozark, which is a real lake. Actually, it was just recently in the news when I think it was during Memorial Day or something like that, that the beaches of Ozark opened and it was super crowded. So I heard it on the news. I was like, oh, that's Ozark from Netflix. And so he moves there with his family. And then, of course, a very rural environment. He used to live in Chicago, where it was, anyway, a big city. He had his methods to launder money, and now he has to relearn that again in a rural environment where it's much harder than he thought it would be. But, of course, if he doesn't succeed, then his family is going to pay the price, and they're all going to die. So the first time I saw that episode, the first episode, I just didn't understand what the whole show was about. Maybe I was also tired. I just didn't follow it. Didn't really appeal to me. I rewatched the first episode because Sebastian insisted that it was really good. So I gave it another chance, rewatched it, and I don't know why I didn't like it the first time. I love it. It's a great show. It has a bit of Breaking Bad type of vibe to it. It is not as funny as Breaking Bad. It's more serious. It is a bit violent. So a bit. Sometimes it's pretty violent. But it's gripping. The story is gripping. And, I can't wait to see what will happen to them. And, of course, whether he will succeed. It's just one of those series where you're made to root for the bad guy. Anyway. It's a very dysfunctional family also, which creates a lot of interesting story narratives or character arcs. And then I saw another series that popped up on the main screen of Netflix the other day, and I was immediately intrigued because I thought I was watching a trailer for a movie. The movie is called Snowpiercer. It was based on I think on a cartoon or an anime. And the movie itself won an Oscar a couple of years ago. I remember hearing about that, and I think it was a Korean movie. I never saw it. It was a science fiction movie. It's based on a society where it's like this post-apocalyptic type of situation. The Earth is heating up because of our actions, and then the scientists are trying to cool it down by modifying the atmosphere. That experiment goes wrong, and temperatures drop all over the planet. A new ice age. Outside, it's like a minus 190. If you stay outside for 5 seconds, you die. You freeze to death. So the only escape is a huge train that is built by a very rich dude, and it's like a modern-day Ark. So he gathers the rich and the wealthy on that train, and for some reason, which will probably be explained later on, that train has to just keep on going. It's like Speed with Sandra Bullock, but then with a train. So the train can't stop for some reason. It's a huge train, and right before they start, a lot of the poor people that have gotten wind of the fact that there is this train have entered the train, forced themselves in the back of the train, the tail of the train, and are being subdued by the rich people, and they try to take over the train. There's a lot of kind of class inequality. So, of course, it is a typical science fiction tale about, that tries to mirror stuff that's happening in the real world, with the wealthy, the happy few, suppressing the poor people. In the first episode of this series. So this turned out to be not the movie, but a television series based on the same premise, which kind of surprising because the movie is not that old. But anyway, we live in the age of remakes. In the first episode, it's also shown that the poor are quite religious. And so there's this woman who is praying the rosary, and she's asking God to help them in their insurrection against the rich. It's interesting to see just non-judgmental religious expression in that first episode. Let me play you the trailer. It gives you a little bit more of the vibe of that series. This, of course, I play the trailer. I play the sound of the trailer.
Attention all passengers. Wilford Industries wishes you good morning. Mr. Wilford would like to address the rumors of disturbances in the tail. Let me assure you, your security is our highest priority. Order will be restored.
7 years ago, the world ended. Now the train is all that's left. First, the weather changed. In the final days of the freeze, the rich retreated to an ark.
It looks very good, I have to say. Special effects are very good.
This is Snowpiercer. This is how we survive.
So the train is called Snowpiercer.
There are those who have and those who suffer.
What do you see when you look at this train?
I see a fortress to class.
I see 3,000 souls surviving on a planet determined to freeze all life.
Today, we take this train. We march to the end.
It's kind of an Independence Day speech here. The trailer looks super exciting. Now, as all trailers do, it shows you the most exciting visual parts of the series. Plus, it gives you a little bit of the background of what this show is about. The actual series is much slower paced. That first episode, there's a lot. It's all happening in very confined, closed quarters. Of course, being on a train, that's obvious. And it starts kind of with a murder mystery. Someone has been killed. One of the rich people has been killed, and a guy who lives in the tail of the train, who used to be before this new ice age, used to be a homicide detective, is being brought to the rich part of the train to help solve the murder. And so it's not at all what you expect. You see this trailer and you think, oh, this is going to be so exciting, and it's all going to be action and explosions, and there are a lot of snow avalanches and stuff. None of that is in the first episode, but it does create a nice kind of dark atmosphere. You feel like you're inside that train. And I always like these stories where you're like inside a spaceship and you have to find the exit. You're in this, you're on the bus that you don't know how to stop it. And if it stops, it explodes. I like these shows that take place in a relatively small environment. Now, this train is not that small. It's huge. I think it's like hundreds and hundreds of carriages. I don't know how it propels itself, where it gets the energy. Can't be running on coals or electricity, because the rest of the world is frozen completely. So maybe a lot of that, a lot of the intricacies of the concept of the train won't be explained. I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe that's just redundant because it's about the story of the people that are on the train. Or maybe they'll reveal it later on. It doesn't really matter to the story in the way it's told. I hope that it will pick up the pace a little bit. But for now, what it reminds me most of, also in terms of when it comes to the theme itself, is Hunger Games. Or Divergent, young adult novels like that, where it's all about this society that is split in classes, and the story is told from the perspective of the poor that are trying to overcome their captivity. So it's always like a good story is always about the underdog that fights against the established order. So that's pretty good. Yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. So far, I'm liking it. It looks good. It's not great acting, but it's serviceable. And I'll let you know when I've seen the entire series. And with that, it is time to move over to our second segment of the day, the Peculiar Bunch.
Catholics rock!
Here at the Peculiar Bunch, we're always happy to tell you everything you always wanted to know about Catholics, and you were afraid to ask.
regular bunch. No meat on Friday.
Oh, meat? What do they eat? Light bulbs?
And today I want to talk about some memes that are doing the rounds on social media about priests using squirt guns to bless people with holy water.
Man, you guys got more crazy rules than Blockbuster Video.
Yeah, so you may have seen the photos of a priest standing near a baptisterial font, I think that's how you call it. And then parents are standing on the left side of the picture, holding their baby with stretched arms, and then the priest is aiming his water-squirting gun, or what is it, super soaker, to the child, and presses the trigger. And there are some other memes, similar memes like that, and even some photos of priests actually blessing, I think it was blessing cars or something like that with a squirt gun. And there, of course, most of the time people take that in just repost it because it's funny. It's funny to see. It's not. At least when I saw those photos, I didn't expect it to be serious. However, it does turn out that in some cases those photos did depict a blessing where priests were using these squirt guns. Sometimes brightly green or orange colored. And in other cases, the photos were staged. Well, as you can imagine, there was quite a bit of discussion about this. Is this allowed? Is this a good idea? Let's talk about, is this a good idea? I would say no, it's not a good idea for multiple reasons. First of all, safety. One of the first rules that were communicated at the beginning of the corona crisis was don't use holy water. Get rid of all the holy water in church because it is water is a very good transmission medium for the virus. So don't use holy water. It's still prohibited in church. People can take holy water from, if you have like a reservoir for holy water, then they are allowed to take it home for personal use. But then the tap, the actual, dispenser has to be cleaned after every person. So in my situation, in my parishes, there is just no holy water for the time being. The second reason why this is not a good idea has to do with the function of holy water. Holy water itself is not magical water. It's not, chemically, it's not different from regular water. It's water that has been blessed with a prayer. And the holy water itself is what we call in the Catholic Church a sacramental. So that sounds like sacrament, right? The sacraments are very important for Catholics. They are the means through which God tries to change us, love us, bring us into his communion. The sacraments have both a significance. It's a sign. You use certain material things like water, for instance, for baptism, or oils for the anointment of the sick, or the distribution of the sacrament of confirmation. But it's more than just a symbolic gesture. The sacraments in the Catholic tradition also do what they mean. So, for instance, water, what is the meaning of washing someone with water? It gets rid of the dirt. Water is a symbol of life. There is no life without water. Water in the Bible is a very strong, recurring symbol of transition from death to life. Think of the crossing of the Red Sea. So the meaning is life. But the sacrament itself is not just symbolically expressing that life, but by the sacrament of baptism, a person really receives the grace of eternal life. So it's also accomplishing something. And so both the material aspect of the sacraments and its effect on the person that receives that sacrament are intrinsically linked. Now, with the sacramentals, it is different. Sacramentals also have to do with material signs. Like, for instance, holy water. When people enter a church, let's say if there were no corona crisis, people would enter a Catholic church, and in the back of the church, near the entrance, you will find these small containers with holy water. You put your hand in it, and you cross yourself with holy water. That in itself is not going to change you. The holy water, as such, is just regular water. It's not like, for instance, the bread in the Eucharist, in the sacrament of the Eucharist, that, according to Catholic belief, once it is consecrated during Mass, it is no longer bread. It has the outward aspects of bread, but its core, in a certain way, its essence has been changed from regular bread into the body and the real presence of Christ himself. The same is true for the wine. So for Catholics, the bread and the wine, after consecration, are no longer bread and wine. They are the body and blood of Christ. They are the real presence of Christ. Now, of course, we're talking about something that is essentially way beyond our faculties. We cannot comprehend this, but it is. So our way of talking about it is always insufficient. But there is let's say, an ontological transformation, you could say, of the matter that is used in that sacrament. With holy water, that's not the case. The holy water after the blessing is still just water and is also considered to be just water. However, it is, you could say, dedicated water. It is water that now has a purpose, that is meant to remind you of something, of open you for something. In the case of holy water, it's very obvious. It refers to our baptism. So the reason that we cross ourselves with holy water when we enter a church is to remind ourselves that we have been baptized and we're entering the house of the Lord, whose life, to whom our life belongs to. So it kind of makes sense. You enter God's house, you cross yourself to remind you, that's my God. I am part of his family. But the water itself does not change you, it does have an effect on you, but it does not depend on the intrinsic qualities of the water, but it is you being reminded through this water that has been dedicated to this purpose. You're reminded of your baptism, and that in itself, of course, can help you to open yourself to God's presence there. It helps you become more aware, and awareness, of course, means that you're maybe more open to what God wants to tell you or wants to do with you. So as you can imagine, because a sacramental is linked to the sacrament and is pointing towards the sacramental itself, it also requires a certain dignified form. It's not magical water. So it does matter how that sign is distributed and how it is, what the form is of the way in which you use that sacramental. It has to be in line kind of with what it refers to. And in this case, it's baptism, and it is the very first sacrament that we receive in our journey with God. And so that is maybe one of the most important moments of our lives. It's the moment that we were baptized. It's the beginning of our relationship with God. And so that in itself is a very beautiful, valuable thing. And by using squirt guns to distribute holy water, you kind of invalidate the importance of what it refers to. I'm trying to find a good analog example. Think of a relationship with someone you love dearly. With your mom, let's say Mother's Day. You love your mom. Your mom is super important to you. Well, if you bring her flowers, you're not going to bring her plastic flowers that you bought at the $1 store. What is that going to mean? You can say, well, it's just flowers, whatever. It's a sign that counts. But no, it really matters. The form matters. And if you get real flowers and beautiful flowers that are fragrant and nice to look at, that is an expression. The flowers themselves are not containing the love and the respect that you have for your mom, but they are definitely a sign of that reverence that you have, or that respect that you have for your mom. And it would be disrespectful to bring her plastic flowers, or I don't know, just whatever. You see what I mean? So in this respect, I think that using squirt guns, even though it may be, maybe someone came up with that just trying to be creative. How can we safely bless people with holy water without touching them? But it's still, the connotations of a squirt gun are not the kind of connotations that you want to be linking to the very important sacrament of baptism. And there is an alternative for this, and some of the commentators remind us of that. There is actually a liturgical tool that is totally able to be used in situations of social distancing, and it is the aspergillium. Aspergillium, as the word aspergere, a Latin word, which means to sprinkle. It resembles like a ball that is hollow on the inside. There are some holes in it, and it's put on the end of a stick. You dip it into the holy water, and then you sprinkle it. And because it has small, tiny holes in it, that will distribute the water. Now, in Corona times, I would still not recommend using that, but you can easily cover the same distance as a squirt gun. So why these priests have not used the aspergillium, that should be part of any church inventory. I think it's probably because they thought it would create nice memes. And that was definitely the explanation that the priest gave on that photo where he seems to be baptizing a child with a squirt gun. That was just done because they thought it would be funny. It is completely staged. The parents actually asked the priest to pose for that. So there wasn't even water in the squirt gun. So, and you can imagine, since that thing went viral and got like 1 million views on Twitter, the poor priest must have gotten quite a bit of flack. Actually, it would probably also invalidate the baptism itself, because baptism should be done by immersion or by what's the word in English? You have to I don't know, what's the English verb? Let me look that up in Google Translate. You have to sprinkle the water in a certain way. Gieten. Gieten. Sometimes I get just my brain freezes. Come on, why is Google Translate not working here? Gieten? How do you say that in English? Translate to pour. Pfft, duh. All right. For the baptism to be valid, water has to be poured on the head of the infant, or could be an adult as well, who is to be baptized. And that has to happen 3 times, whether you pour that with your hand or with, whatever. But the water has to be poured over the head. That's how it is described. And sometimes a wrong application of the water during baptism, in any sacrament, if you don't follow the rules, then it could invalidate the sacrament. Of course, it's very nuanced, because there's also an aspect of, the baptism of desire. If, for instance, the parents would really desire their child to be baptized, and the priest would use a squirt gun, even though that is not allowed and is illicit, and, technically would invalidate the baptism, the fact that the parents would desire their child to be baptized, the child would still be baptized. So, Catholic theology is, or not theology, but the Catholic canon law is actually quite flexible when it comes to all these things. What matters is God wants to reach these people. If they are honest and if they long to meet Christ in the sacraments, then God has a lot of different ways to reach us. But that's not the point here. It is, should you use squirt guns to distribute holy water or baptize? I would say no. There are alternatives to that.
When did you become an expert in thermonuclear astrophysics?
Last night. The packet. The extraction theory papers. Am I the only one who did the reading?
While I was playing the jingle, Samuel in the chat says, well, I disagree with you, Father. When I was in a monastery, the monks used a birch bundle to bless the congregation. Well, that is all. It's not, I didn't say that. A birch bundle would actually be, I think, proper. That is a dignified way of distributing holy water, and that is also common. The aspergillium is just something that you can store, and it works for years, whereas birch bundles decay. So that's not a problem. It's still not a squirt gun, right? And if your mother is allergic to flowers, you might actually get her plastic flowers. Well, you know what? Sure. There is always an exception to the rule. That was not what I was trying to explain. It's like if you would buy plastic flowers because they're cheaper and you think, well, your mom is going to be happy with plastic flowers. Well, she should be happy with plastic flowers. I'm not going to buy these expensive real flowers. That's what I tried to say. That would be disrespectful. Always look at the context. Anyway, books. I've been starting to read a long-awaited prequel to the Hunger Games series. I'm quite a fan of the Hunger Games trilogy, and also of the movies. Suzanne Collins is the writer, and I think it was a couple of years ago that she announced that she was going to write a prequel, and then the prequel also, or the prequel series got also bought, I think. I'm not sure which company bought the rights, but it's going to be turned into movies. Why I'm not surprised. What did surprise me was the premise of the books, and that is the books would be about the villain of the Hunger Games of the current trilogy, which is Snow, not Jon Snow. What's his first name? Snow. He's definitely, his last name is Snow. Hunger Games. He's this awful president of the districts, a tyrant who forces these children to fight each other in an arena, and all that is to create spectacle so that people would be distracted enough not to insurrect against his rule. His first name is Coriolanus. Coriolanus, what a name! But I think in the movies he's called President Snow. This book takes place when President Snow, Coriolanus, is still a young adult, 18 years old, and so this is the Hunger Games themselves are already there. This has been an ongoing, like an age-old tradition in that world, in that fictional world. However, the Hunger Games are not at all as developed, as sophisticated as in the time frame of the existing story or the existing movies. So if you've seen the Hunger Games in the movies, it is very, very sophisticated. It's very sci-fi. There are like wild animals that are holograms, and there is like a huge amount of technology involved in trying to force these kids to kill each other, basically. It's a very gruesome premise. And then the entire Hunger Games event, which takes place every few years, I think, is also filmed and streamed live to the entire kingdom or whatever it is. This entire reign of President Snow is watching these Hunger Games on TV. So the books themselves are, of course, also a little bit of a translation of our hunger for reality shows. Or at least when these books were written, reality shows were all the rage. I think they're kind of less important now, I think, to people because we've seen too many of them. But anyway, it was also this criticism of our desire to invade other people's lives and watch them suffer, and there are some reality shows that thrive on that. Even those so-called talent shows are mostly about humiliating people and then applauding a few of them and making them into superstars, but it's, of course, none of that has anything to do with reality. It's this aggravated form of reality, and so the Hunger Games story is definitely, among other things, I think in its core, it's a political story that warns us for the tyranny of the rich, and it's about the dignity of people. In that respect, it's something that, especially in the last book, there is, I think, a post scriptum or an interview with Suzanne Collins where she describes what the book is really about. And I remember listening to that and being like full of admiration for the kind of, this is a young adult novel, so she wants to educate her readers. And I thought it was a very, very brilliant way of showing the consequences of the political choices that we make in our society. And so this new series of books tells the story about Snow. The Hunger Games are not on TV at that time. They don't have all that technology, but the core idea is still young kids fighting other young kids as a means to basically distract people from the true evil that is going on, the true enemy, which of course is the ruling class. And Snow is not a bad guy at the beginning. He's just trying to. He's actually a coach or something like that of one of the girls that has to compete in these Hunger Games, and he is this coach to get the credits necessary to get a scholarship, something like that. And then the story is about these birds. Now you know that the symbol on the books of the Hunger Games is this mockingjay. It's a bird that at first seems to be kind of a bit of a fantasy bird. It's apparently a cross between a mockingbird and like a bird that is able to mimic sounds and to record conversations. So these are genetically modified birds, and they were used by Snow, by the ruling class, to overhear conversations in the lower districts, and then report back as spies to the people that live in the capital. However, it turns out the people in the lower districts figured out that those birds were recording their conversations, so they were feeding them false information, and so the capital decided to give up on these birds, and then these spy birds paired up with mockingbirds, and that created a mockingjay, so a bird that is able to repeat conversations, but also to sing songs, and so a lot of the song, the insurrection song, is the song of the mockingjay. So the bird turns from a spy into the symbol of the resistance, and so there is also this hunt for these mockingjays in the book that Snow is tasked with. He has to find these birds and, I don't know, bring them back to the capital or something like that. I've only just started to read the book. It is just as easy to read it. Suzanne Collins has a very accessible style. It's not, high literature, but it is an easy read, and I like that. It's a good flow in the story. The only downside is this is not the Hunger Games. This is a prequel, and it suffers from an aspect that many prequels suffer from. You already know what's going to happen. You know that Snow is going to end up being the evil president. So it takes away the tension. And the book is a bit unevenly paced. There are some exciting moments in it, but then there are also these very slow chapters where not much happens. A lot of exposition also in the beginning of the book. Of course, caveat, this is just the first book. Maybe the story will develop over time. And what I like about it is that it takes place in the universe, in the world that was built through the Hunger Games novels, which is, I think, a very interesting concept, an interesting world. And I always like prequels because it makes me look differently to the existing story, just like the Star Wars prequels did that with A New Hope and Empire and Return of the Jedi. Once you know what the backstory of the Emperor is, it sets everything in a different light. And that is, I think, that's a cool aspect of prequels, and I can't wait to see where Suzanne Collins will take this in these Hunger Games prequels. The book itself is called The Ballad of Songbirds and Snake. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snake. I'm listening to the audiobook. I'm not reading the book itself. So I still have about 16 hours to go. I guess I have to do a lot of walking in order to finish this book. But in a couple of days, I should be able to finish it. And then I'll get back to it and give you a final review. But now it is time for maybe the most interesting segment of this particular episode of my show. And that is our science fiction segment. We need to talk about two of my favorite science fiction franchises, Star Trek and Star Wars. And oh my gosh, I'm so excited about something that will be and something that could have been. I'll explain in a second. But, oh boy.
I see aliens. Little aliens from outer space.
And how are things in outer Plutonia?
How many times have I told you not to wear your space boots in the house?
Go to shape I'm in, you can donate my body to science fiction.
Get your suit on! We need you!
All right. Merla wants to know, where can I buy that book? I found it on the subscription, the audiobook subscription that I have, but I think it is on sale at the Amazon Kindle store, maybe also on other services that sell digital books. It may also be in your bookstore. Although with the corona situation, maybe there might be some delay. Just check with your local bookstore or look online. Again, it's called The Ballad of Songbirds and Snake. Now, let's talk Star Trek. Of course, I'm a little bit behind because last week I didn't record a show. But as you now all know, there is going to be yet another Star Trek show. I could have never guessed that there would be a time that there would be like 3 concurrent Star Trek shows and maybe even more coming, as well as Star Wars television series. I mean, isn't it great to be alive right now? So, something that fans have been clamoring for ever since they saw him appear in Star Trek Discovery is a new series based on the character of Captain Pike. Now, for the Trekkies among you, you know that Pike is the predecessor on the bridge of the Enterprise to Captain Kirk. Before Captain Kirk, I think Captain Pike had been the captain of the Enterprise, working with Spock and with Number 1 for 7 years or something like that. So, in theory, they could do a series, a 7-season run series. The original series was originally going to have Captain Pike instead of Captain Kirk. They filmed a pilot episode. There was a very fascinating backstory of that in the memoirs of Leonard Nimoy, who plays Spock. So the original series would have Spock alongside Captain Kirk, and the first pilot had them visiting a planet with these aliens with huge gray heads that are able to conjure up mental images and make them seem real to the visitors. And it was a very complicated science fiction, very hardcore science fiction story. And a very complicated one. A number of the elements of that pilot episode were later on integrated in, I think, one of the first, not the first, but one of the first episodes of the first season of the original series. But anyway, the problem of that first pilot episode was that it was a little bit too highbrow for the people in charge. They were like, we don't understand the story. We need something else. We need a different dude. Pike is boring. Give us someone else. And then they ultimately ended up contacting William Shatner. Actually, I read that in Shatner's memoirs, not in Nimoy's memoirs. So they approached Shatner, who I think was involved in a totally different type of TV show at the time. He was not interested in science fiction at all. I think he's never been interested in science fiction or in Star Trek. But anyway, he was interested in making some money. So that's how he ended up on the bridge, replacing the more, morally upright Captain Pike, and became this womanizer, is much more of an action hero than Pike was. And so that is, well, the rest is history. So Kirk took the place of Pike, and then they came up with a backstory where Pike died. And if you've seen the J.J. Abrams reboot, you know that Pike appears in that particular storyline and also dies at one point, I think in the second movie. But what was so cool of Discovery was, of course, that Star Trek Discovery, the new series, took place in the time frame, more or less, of the original series. And so at one point, they encounter the Enterprise. And it happens, I think, was it at the last episode of the first or the second season? I don't remember. But anyway, the encounter shows us that the bridge of the Enterprise is manned by 3 people that we know from those early pilots. And it is Captain Pike, number 1, and Spock. And it's yet another actor playing Spock. The cool thing, I think there's just 3 episodes where Pike and the crew of the Enterprise is featured. But the actor who plays Pike made a huge impact on everyone watching Star Trek Discovery. Anson Mount is his name. Ethan Peck played Spock, and Rebecca Romijn played number 1. And it was instant classic Star Trek material. I remember jumping up when I saw those scenes. They redid the bridge of the Enterprise. They kept some of the design elements of the original series, but they upgraded it and made it look very cool, very, very cool. But they had the original costumes, and there was something about the demeanor of Captain Pike that reminded me very much of classic storytelling of those early days of Star Trek. This is a captain that encapsulates in his behavior what we're all longing for, and that is moral leadership. This was finally a captain that wasn't a traitor. It wasn't a wolf in sheep's clothes. This was a guy who wanted to do the right thing, like a true leader that you could look up to. Someone with a sense of humor, but also with a backbone. And I was not surprised that fans embraced it, because these times where we live in such a weird world, where world leaders sometimes behave like children, where you know there's this mistrust of our of the government. There is so much skepticism and cynicism in our world. I was not surprised that when Star Trek brought back this character of Captain Pike, we all were like, oh, please, let us live in a world where Captain Pike is the boss. I would totally serve on the Enterprise under a captain like that, and with a crew that has such chemistry, like Rebecca Romijn and Ethan Peck. We want to have... It is nostalgia, and it's also, I think, a true, genuine desire for moral leadership. And that is what he exuded in some... I don't know why, but it just worked. And so CBS, early on when fans started to rave about Pike, they said, we are listening. Don't worry, we are listening. And I think that very, very quickly they discovered that they were onto something. And so just recently they announced that these 3 people will feature as the main characters of a new show that is going to be much more like classic Star Trek, in the sense that it won't be this overarching story. There may be some episodes that form like a mythology, but it's going to be more episodic, and it's called Strange New Worlds. What an amazing title for a Star Trek series. It's going to be focused much more on exploration, on what made Star Trek so cool to begin with. It's like every episode, there is another encounter with strange new worlds where you have to figure out what's going on and how you can help and how you relate to all these new life forms and exciting places that you discover. So to me, that sounded like music to my ears. This sounds so like the right thing to do. And I've got great confidence in you could just feel the chemistry is right. And if there's one thing that is important to a crew-based television series like Star Trek is, it is this internal chemistry of the actors with each other and this interplay between the characters. So I couldn't be more excited. And it may very well be that this series is going to be more popular than Discovery. I'm not sure about Picard, because that also, of course, has its slew of fans. By the way, I was very saddened to hear that because of the Corona situation, the production of Picard 2, the second season, is going to be delayed. Hopefully not for too long, but it does it does create a delay. Fortunately, with The Mandalorian second season, that is not going to be the case because they wrapped filming that right before the Corona situation. So it may impact season 3, who knows. But I think for Star Wars, we're cool. And of course, we get probably also more animated series. They were also filming the Rogue One prequel. I'm not sure where they were at with that. And then there was multiple other Star Wars series in development and movies. But I guess we'll hear soon enough. When we're going to see. I don't think they promised us anything. I don't know about the premiere date. I think that filming of Strange New Worlds was also delayed a bit. Yeah, I think they were also the writers were encouraged to keep writing, keep improving the scripts because they would start filming a little bit later. I don't mind that. I mean, the more time they have to write scripts, the higher chances are that this series is going to rock. So, there is quite a bit of speculation online as to whether this prequel will also show us other characters. Will we see Kirk? Could they do like a cameo of Kirk? Technically, probably not on the bridge of the Enterprise because we know when Kirk and Pike meet for the first time, and that's after the events in this series. But it doesn't mean that Kirk is not around. He is somewhere, so maybe they can kind of squeeze him in. There are other characters and elements from the original Star Trek series that they could bring back, and actually, I think they will, because why wouldn't they? That is one of the cool things of The Mandalorian. It's all these cameos. It's all these the familiar robots, droids, characters that they show us and that they tease, like Boba Fett and Ahsoka. That is going to excite the fan base. So I'm thinking that they will take a page or two out of the success of The Mandalorian. Speaking of Star Wars, did you notice this very cool article? Maybe you missed it, about this the very first TV series that was that George Lucas was working on back in the days when he was still in charge of Lucasfilm. He was planning a very high-tech TV show using the latest green screen techniques and motion capture and whatnot. And he would be a serialized Star Wars story. So in a way, what is happening now at Disney Plus is what George Lucas first conceived many years ago. He wanted to create a television series based on the underworld of Coruscant. And it would be called Star Wars Underworld. It would be about all the bad guys. It would tell the stories of all the, Jabba the Hutt, the Mafia. A lot of this stuff has been developed in the expanded universe, in the books, and also in some of the animated series, of course. You have Darth Maul, heading this crime syndicate. We've seen him appear in live action at the end of Solo. So they did take a number of those ideas, but the actual television series got canceled. It never made it into production. They did a couple of months ago. There was some leaked footage of tests that they did to basically the green screen tests, how they were going to film this. And this was classic. Back in the days, George Lucas was all about virtual sets, and as we all know, prequels were filmed mostly against green screen, which made it very hard for the actors to act convincingly, because if you can't see it, requires so much more energy than if you are in a real environment. They kind of backtracked on that later on with the production of the sequels. They did create real sets again, and I think it definitely helped. I don't think they will ever go back to fully, green screen based sets. And it's not even necessary anymore, because The Mandalorian introduced another way of filming for relatively low cost, and that is this circular stage with huge LED screens on which they can project anything. If you've seen the documentary about the making of The Mandalorian, it shows you how it is done, and it is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. The combination of that 360-degree set in combination with some of the stuff that they filmed outside, it creates a huge tapestry that I don't think you would be able to do with green screen. But anyway, George Lucas thought, what is the cheapest way to create very exciting looking television in the Star Wars universe? Let's just use what we've learned during the filming of the prequels and make TV with that. Now, according to what we already knew, the preparation for that television series was already very, very far ahead. They had written many, many scripts for multiple seasons. What we didn't know was who was writing these scripts alongside George Lucas. Well, it turns out that one of the things that I've always said should happen actually happened and almost happened. And that was involve Ronald D. Moore in Star Wars. Let him write scripts for Star Wars. He is one of the best science fiction storytellers that I know. I have huge admiration for Ronald D. Moore. What he did with Battlestar Galactica, I don't think we'll ever see something as good as that. The writing was fantastic. Ronald D. Moore is... I don't know of any writer-director who is this good in especially telling character-based material. Well, it turns out that George Lucas invited him and a bunch of other writers to help him write the scripts for Star Wars Underworld. Now, here's what's written in this article on Empire, empireonline.com. He was talking to Collider, the website Collider. Moore says, I was one of several. There was a bunch of international writers that they assembled. We would gather up at Skywalker Ranch. This is all new information. Nobody knew that Ronald D. Moore was involved in Star Wars. We would gather up at Skywalker Ranch once every 6 to 8 weeks, something like that, and we would break stories together. And right after, we'd go off and write some drafts and bring them back, and George and we would sit down and critique them, and then do another draft and break more stories. It was great. It was a ball. It was a lot of fun. It didn't happen ultimately. We wrote, I'd say, somewhere in the 48 scripts, something like that. The theory was that George wanted to write all the scripts and get them all done, and then he was going to go off and figure out how to produce them, because he wanted to do a lot of cutting-edge technological stuff with CG and virtual sets and so on. And so he had a whole thing he wanted to accomplish. And what happened was, we wrote the scripts, and then George said, okay, this is enough for now, and then I'll get back to you. I want to look into all the production things. And then time went by, and like a year or something after that is when he sold Lucasfilm to Disney. So we were on the brink of getting a Star Wars television show penned, co-written by Ronald D. Moore. Now, call me intrigued. What happened to those scripts? Are they salvageable? Can we please bring back Ronald D. Moore for a television series? I mean, if you can give us The Mandalorian with Jon Favreau and so many talented writers, if you can do a prequel for Rogue One with, probably good people involved as well, why not bring back a television series? Why not just do this for Disney Plus? With our modern technology, we could do so much better than the green screen stuff that George Lucas had in mind. A good story is a good story. If Ronald D. Moore was involved in this, then I am convinced that the stories were good. And I am convinced that they are worth turning into a TV show. So Disney Plus, if you're listening, which you're not, make it so. Oh, probably the wrong reference here, but do it. Do it. That's it. Make it so. Do it. Give us that TV show. Bring back Ronald D. Moore. Give him a movie. I don't care. I want Ronald D. Moore to write for Star Wars. He actually already did. He's good pals with George Lucas. Honor that legacy. Bring back Ronald D. Moore. Don't let him waste his time with, other stuff. He's been doing Outlander for how many years now? That's fine. That's great. That's cool. But it's not Star Wars. Come on. Give us Ronald D. Moore. Okay. I'm going to stop it there. It is time to talk technology.
We are on the cutting edge of technology.
Wow. Well, what does that mean?
Let's plug it in. It's going to say, hey, I see you plugged in a new device. And it's going to load in the appropriate drivers. You'll notice that this scanner build... Whoa.
Well, all your technology stuff, it just ends in disaster.
But there is one more thing.
All right, the one more thing that I want to talk about is cameras. Live streaming cameras. I tried out two things just this past week. The first one is to stream a procession through the old medieval center of the city of Amersfoort using just my phone and the Osmo Mobile 3. That's a gimbal. A gimbal is a stabilizing device. And I was streaming to Facebook, and it was quite a challenge because it was of course, since public processions are not allowed. This is a medieval tradition that has been honored every single year. Even during World War II, they would still walk the streets in procession in honor of Our Lady of Amersfoort. It goes back to an old story in the Middle Ages where a girl wanted to enter a convent in Amersfoort. Her parents gave her a dowry consisting of just this very simple plaster statuette of the Virgin Mary. She was ashamed of being of poor descent. She threw the statuette in the canal surrounding the city. The canal is still there. And then a couple of weeks or months later, this other poor girl who lived in Amersfoort gets this dream that she has to go to the water and look for something. She goes to the place that she saw in her dreams, and she finds that statuette of the Virgin Mary. Miracles start to happen around that statue. Prayers were heard and answered. People were cured. And before you know it, Amersfoort is an international place of pilgrimage. And from all over Europe, people flock to the city. That's how we get that huge church and the big tower that is still in the middle of the city. Well, to honor the Virgin Mary, there was this yearly procession, and after the Protestant Reform, that procession had to go underground, just like in Amsterdam. So they couldn't do a genuine liturgical procession, but the government could not prevent Catholics to just walk the streets. So that's what they did very early in the morning. They would just walk the procession in silence without any external signs. And that would be it. And that tradition is still here. Because of COVID, it almost didn't happen this year, which would have been a break in tradition. For many, many years, maybe centuries. And I was like, that is not going to happen. And so I approached the person who was organizing the procession. I said, well, what if we do it virtually or digitally? What if you, the deacon, and a priest from the Old Catholic Church, because this is a ecumenical tradition in our town, why don't you walk the procession and I will stream it? And so that's what I did. I filmed the entire thing using the Osmo Mobile 3 and my Asus Zenfone 6. And that actually was a great success. It was a lot of fun to do. Many more people walked with us than would have walked in reality, because this is happening early in the morning, like 7:30 a.m. And also hundreds and hundreds of people watched the footage afterwards and are now aware of this pilgrimage or of this procession. So who knows, maybe next year we will have hundreds of participants. So that was my first. I was very impressed by the Osmo Mobile 3. I used to have a Chinese gimbal, thinking, well, why would I get an expensive DJI if I can get a Chinese knockoff? Well, it's all about the software. So much better for the Osmo. By the way, that's also a Chinese brand, I think. Anyway, so this was a very, very, actually very affordable device, and the results were out of this world. The only downside is if you stream through Facebook, if you use the mobile app of Facebook, it streams in very low quality, 480p. So it's very grainy, very blurry. And I haven't been able to figure out how to improve that. I know that to Facebook you can stream in HD using just a regular laptop. That's how I'm streaming most of the masses here. But on mobile, very low resolution. The alternative would be, of course, to use YouTube for streaming. And that has another downside. You are not allowed to stream from mobile devices unless you have more than 1,000 subscribers. Now, for my YouTube account, not a problem in the world because I have 27,000 followers. But for my little new parish channel that I created, Erka Eemland, that is a huge problem because after 10 weeks, we only have 35 subscribers because most parishioners are not into social media. So I'll probably never get to 1,000 subscribers for that channel. I'm racking my brain. How can I get 1,000 subscribers? Because I do think that YouTube is the way to go, even for our regular masses. I've gotten back to YouTube for my Mass for Geeks, and it's much more effective than Facebook. Facebook is great. It's very easy to use, but not everyone is on Facebook. And once you've streamed live, the video disappears into nothingness. It's just not a video platform. And YouTube is. And so it's much easier to get a long tail on YouTube, which means that people will discover your content sometimes months or years after you've recorded it. So it will continue to have a certain impact. It's much, much better than Facebook. But how do you get past that 1,000 subscriber threshold? I've looked into, maybe they have exceptions for nonprofits, but none of that. There's a YouTube for nonprofits, but it's not very useful. So if anyone has ideas, if you work for Google and YouTube and you want to help out, contact me. I'd love to hear from you. And the second thing that I tried out are these PTZ cameras, basically remote cameras. Awesome experience. I will use hopefully 2 of them during my next Mass for Geeks, and I will go into the details of that experience in the next episode of this show. And with that, it is time to wrap things up. It is more than time. I'm talking for 1 hour, 13 minutes, and 16 seconds. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for the privilege of your time. Thanks for being a supporter. If you support me on Patreon, and if you don't, check it out on patreon.com/Father Roderick and to get access to my other show. And in Father Roderick to the Max, that's the name of that show, we'll talk about my top 5 of comfort food. I'll talk a little bit about what happened 100 years ago, the birth of someone who had a massive impact on my own life. I'll give you a review of the 2014 comic series about Miss Marvel. I'll talk a little bit about a very cool spin-off game. It's actually not a game, but it's based on a game, Assassin's Creed in Visitor Mode. We'll talk about kneelers in Catholic liturgy, and I'll give you my thoughts on the rumored Apple Glass AR. So, if you are interested in that type of stuff, and you've got, a couple of bucks a month to spare to help me out, check it out, patreon.com/Father Roderick, and you will have instant access to that weekly show as well. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon. God bless. And that's a wrap, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for your patience as well. Apologies that I couldn't respond to everything that was happening in the chat room. I sometimes try to read what's happening, but sometimes I've moved on to a different topic. So, is The Mandalorian 2 really going to have Ahsoka in it? I don't know. I hope it is. Well, that was rumored. Cad Bane series. I'm not sure if that's... I don't know. I've never been a fan of Cad Bane. I'm sorry. I think it's a weird character. But, yeah, some people like it. The water gun would not make the water blessing invalid. No, it wouldn't make the blessing invalid. It would invalidate probably the baptism, because that there is, it's kind of has to evoke what happened at the river the Jordan. So I don't know. Squirting water is not the same as pouring it, I guess. But anyway, it's I agree with you. You got to laugh about yourself as well. The Discord server is also, I forgot to mention that. If you are a patron, you get access to Discord. And Samuel is doing very good work there in strengthening that community. I'm so sorry that I couldn't spend much time in Discord because, well, life is kind of busy. I really hope things will slow down once society opens up a little bit more. But right now, it's still... I'm making very, very long days. Yesterday, I was still in a meeting at 10 o'clock in the evening. And I started to work at 9 in the morning. So, and then I only had dinner afterwards. That's usually the problem. So, anyway, I do make some time to read, and I do make some time for Animal Crossing. I'm not going to sacrifice that. But it's still not enough. I need more time. Anyway, thank you so much for watching the stream. If you want to listen to the audio version of this show, by all means, go to my website, and you can subscribe there. You can also use your podcast catcher software. Just look for Father Roderick, and that's where you will find the show. I'm going to record my secret show for the patrons right now, so I will not stream that, obviously. Otherwise, it wouldn't be exclusive anymore. But stick around. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, because I think there is some Lego in the imminent future. Lego streams. All right. Talk to you later. Bye.